Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the August live stream that is happening in September. I don't know if we're going to make a theme of this, of being late. Last week was the actual planned and scheduled August live stream. But then I was out on a walk in the beautiful city of Berlin, and then I was unable to get back to my hotel because there was about 20,000 people protesting. I'm not sure what they were protesting. I think they were protesting masks and lockdowns and their inability to use sheep dewormer and other things like that. Anyway, they were between me and the hotel, so yeah, I didn't want any of that. So we had to reschedule, and here we are now, today. We're going to be doing the August live stream. I have lots of interesting questions. Looking forward to answering all of your questions. Say hello in the chat. Let me know if you can hear me okay, if everything's looking good and sounding good. Woohoo! Hopefully it is. Hopefully it is. And I'll apologize in advance because I've had a migraine for 2 days, so my usual level of enthusiasm and energy will be just a tad lower today. Why don't we go right to the first question of the day? Udux Ginder says, my girlfriend always gets your name wrong. Andrei Populous, Anthony Aponoligous, Andrei Polygamoulos, etc. She also doesn't like Bitcoin. Can you tell her why it's so much better than cash and why it's the future? I mean, I have so many questions to ask in response to your question. First of all, how come your girlfriend has such difficulty with Andreas Antonopoulos, but seemingly does not have any problem with Udex Gundir? I don't even know how that works, but apparently it's a problem. All right, Antonopoulos. Let's talk about Greek names for a second. The suffix opoulos is what's known as a patronymic, and what that means is it means the son of. It refers to the lineage through your father. This is very similar to the Irish O, like O'Reilly, that means the son of Riley, or the Scottish MacDonald, which means the son of Donald. The Arabic suffix bin, which means, for example, bin Laden, which means the son of Laden. And of course, the Antonsdottir and Antonsson, which you have in Scandinavian countries like Iceland and other places like that. So Antonopoulos simply means the son of Antony. Well, my dad's name isn't Antony. This was many, many generations ago. There was an Antony, and that Antony's son was named Antonopoulos, which means Antony's son. So it's not that hard, really. You just add opoulos onto the end of a regular name. But anyway, why is Bitcoin so much better than cash and why it's the future? Listen, I think basically Bitcoin gives you freedom. It gives you the freedom to dump your girlfriend who should be better at pronouncing names. Let's see what else we're going to answer. Let's pull up the next question. Let's see, what's the next question? Let's pull it up. Here we go. Could you please explain in plain English what is meant by a computer program being or not being Turing complete? Do you like it like this, full screen? Or do you prefer it where you can see my face and little yellow bars? I don't know. Why don't we do a poll? Let's do a poll. Little yellow bars or a full screen question? Little yellow bars or full screen question? I'll do an actual poll in a second. In the meantime, Alan Turing was a great man. Could you please explain in plain English what is meant by a computer program being or not being Turing complete? Alan Turing was indeed a great man. And one of the great things that I experienced in my life was the first year of my computer science course. Our computer science professor at the University of London gave us a book, which was a biography of Alan Turing. And it was fascinating to read about Alan Turing and his life. It's a tragic ending, by the way. The British government basically tortured him and chemically castrated him for being gay, and he committed suicide. Instead of being a hero for essentially helping the Allies win the Second World War, he was punished for being gay. So it's a tragic story. Anyway, let's go to the question. What is meant by a computer being or not being Turing complete? The simplest way I can explain this, I think, is a Turing complete program or programming language that allows you to operate Turing complete programs is one where the program can express all possible programs. So Alan Turing created this concept of a universal Turing machine, which is basically a theoretical computer that can run any program. Any program can be configured inside a universal Turing machine. And so anything that's equivalent to universal Turing machine is Turing complete, and a Turing complete system is one where you can run any program, and that usually means that it includes some form of loops or recursion. That means that you can do something like repeat this thing until some condition, and that's known as a loop. So run this program until something happens. One of the important characteristics of Turing complete programs is that when they go into a loop, you don't know if they're going to reach an exit condition and stop running. In fact, Alan Turing proved that you can't know in advance whether a computer program will terminate. And this is a very important problem that was proven by Alan Turing to be true. And this is why if you have a programming language that is Turing complete, you don't know if it's ever going to finish running. It has an unpredictable runtime, an unprovable runtime. So a Turing incomplete program is a program that is simple enough, doesn't have loops, doesn't have recursion, that you know how long it's going to take to run. You know all of the possible conditions it will run under and when it's going to terminate. You can actually prove it algorithmically and prove that it's going to run for a specific length of time. And that makes it a lot simpler. It makes it a lot more manageable. So Bitcoin scripting language, for example, is Turing incomplete. It doesn't have loops. It doesn't have recursion. It's been carefully designed to be that way. In fact, it's harder to make something Turing incomplete because many computer programs have been made accidentally Turing complete, where people thought they were incomplete, meaning that they had predictable runtime, and in fact they were not. Turing complete systems, while they can express any possible program and they're very flexible, we never know if they're going to finish running. And that's why when you have a blockchain that operates a Turing complete system, you need a way to meter the time and resources that it uses so that it doesn't just run forever. We can write, for example, a program in the Ethereum virtual machine that will run forever. And in order to prevent that, there's the mechanism of gas, which means that you have to have an upper limit on how much computation you consume when running an Ethereum smart contract. That's just one example. I hope that was a relatively simple explanation in plain English. Wrong button. All right. So if you want to ask questions, remember the questions are submitted in the Slido because that gives people an opportunity to vote on the questions they want answered first. And then I can ignore those votes and answer whatever I want. That's how the process works. All right, we've got 150 people on the live stream. pretty quiet Sunday. Not that many people on the live stream right now. That's okay. It's nice and cozy this way. It's like a small gathering. All right, let's see what we have next. Chocoholic asks, how can I explain to my 12-year-old where Bitcoin comes from? Bitcoin comes from the internet, and it's a system where lots of computers on the internet work together to produce a digital currency and to verify it and secure it. That's the best way I could answer it for a 12-year-old. Then again, a 12-year-old could be one of the most sophisticated hackers out there nowadays, so who knows? Maybe your 12-year-old is Satoshi Nakamoto and they just started really young. All right, let's do a quick positive story time. In the chat, let's share one good thing that has happened during the month of August, during the last month. I'll go first. I got to meet some of you. In fact, I got to meet 5 people at my Berlin happy hour. Happy hours are meetings that I do with my Patreon community builders and supporters. They're a wonderful opportunity to get to know people in person. And we don't just talk about Bitcoin, we talk about anything and everything in life. And I haven't had one of those in almost 2 years. And last week when I was visiting Berlin, I got a chance to do an in-person happy hour. Of course, with all of the necessary anti-COVID protections to keep everybody safe, but we had a wonderful time. I got to meet a couple of people. In fact, some of the people who are in the chat today. Hi, Giovanni, Timo, Anita, Josh, and a few other people there. And so that was a fantastic opportunity. So tell me in the chat something good that happened during the month of August for you. Chris Jr. says, I got to finish all your workshops and convinced my mom to do the introductory workshop. That's fantastic. That's a great story. Sachin Langa says, I got started learning cryptocurrencies and bought books by you, Mastering Bitcoin, Mastering Ethereum, and I started investing in Ethereum. Paul says, the heat wave ended. That's fantastic. Lucia had 5 birthday celebrations in August. Yes to Crypto moved into a new house. Satoshi in Venezuela interviewed Adam Back. Wow. Alejandro got engaged. Well, congratulations, Alejandro. How wonderful. Let's see. Duck King got halfway through the book Programming Bitcoin by Jimmy Song. And Mutaba Shanan translated his first article about Bitcoin into Arabic. Those are some great stories. Sounds like a very, very productive month in August. That was a lot of fun. Let's do this again. All right, let's go to the next question. Giovanni asks, what is Eltoo? What problems does it solve? Is it a no-brainer upgrade? Do you think the software fork needed to implement it might be controversial? A couple of questions packed in there. Let's start from the first one. What is Eltoo? Eltoo is a protocol for payment channels that was proposed by let's see, Christian Decker, Alalo Stocken, and one more co-author. I'm afraid I can't remember the third co-author on the paper. You can look it up. And it's a way of implementing payment channels, which is slightly different than the mechanism we have today. So the mechanism we have today is an implementation of payment channels that is similar to the one first proposed by Joseph Poon and Taj Dryja, the Poon-Dryja channels as they're known. There's a couple of other formulations of payment channels, and L2 is one of them. What problems does it solve? Well, the current implementation of payment channels relies on a penalty mechanism, a sort of mutually assured destruction, where if someone tries to cheat in the payment channel by presenting an old, invalid payment channel state on the blockchain, then you can punish the cheater by publishing a transaction that takes the entire channel balance. So let's say, for example, that I have 0.8 Bitcoin on my end of the channel and you have 0.2 Bitcoin on your end of the channel, but sometime in the past we had 0.5 each. And you publish that past state so that you try to effectively rewind the clock to where we each had 0.5. That would effectively steal 0.3 Bitcoin from me and give it to you. Well, I can issue a penalty transaction and I take the entire 1.0 Bitcoin balance of the channel and you get nothing. So that's the penalty mechanism that exists in payment channels today. It ensures trustless operation and security, but it does require you to constantly monitor the blockchain to see if someone's trying to cheat and be ready to publish that penalty transaction. You have on average between a week or 2 weeks to publish that transaction. And so that's a bit of a hassle. Eltoo uses a mechanism where you keep rebinding the input. That's the proposed mechanism. And effectively, it does away with the need for this mutually assured destruction penalty mechanism by allowing you to simply publish a transaction that corrects the record instead of a penalty. So is it a no-brainer upgrade? It requires an upgrade to the Bitcoin scripting system, which would be a type of signature flag called sighash anyprevout. It was previously known as sighash no input. Those two are essentially the same thing with two different names. And it's also known more directly as input rebinding. Now, is it a no-brainer upgrade? It's not a no-brainer upgrade. It's the kind of thing where if it's used properly for the right reasons in payment channels, it's a good thing. But the feature itself can lead to some problems if it's used incorrectly by by wallet implementers, for example. So there is some controversy around it. Not a lot, just a tiny bit. As for the soft fork needed to implement it, I don't think it's controversial, and I hope it's something that we see implemented next in Bitcoin. In fact, I think there's another question about what's going to be implemented next, which would be a good segue for us to talk about. So that's what L2 is. All right, I see a lot of people still asking questions in the chat. We've got 185 listeners, I'd say viewers, but it's really listeners right now. If you want to ask a question, please ask it in the Slido, not in the chat. I can't really prioritize the ones in the chat, but at the same time, I did see one that I'm going to answer very quickly. Tofu Dog says, is a paper wallet still safe for long cold storage in terms that physical damage and loss is not an issue? Tofu Dog, paper wallets are dangerous for newbies because you can have situations where you can lose the change if you don't manage them properly. They have to be swept. Generally speaking, they're obsolete. So if you have one, it's fine, but I wouldn't start one now. I would use a hardware wallet with a mnemonic phrase backup instead. So in the modern way of doing this is to back up your mnemonic phrase either on paper or steel or something like that. So don't use paper wallets if you don't have them already, but if you have them, they're fine. Next question comes from Anonymous. Post-Taproot, what are the top 1 or 2 important proposals that will come to Bitcoin? What are they? How do they work? And what will they change for users? You know, it's difficult to say what's going to come next, but there are a number of proposals that are out there that seem to have quite a bit of traction. One proposal, for example, is builds upon the Schnorr signature Taproot TapScript upgrade that's going to be activated in November and has already been locked in for activation. And that is cross-input signature aggregation. Cross-input signature aggregation. And this takes advantage of one of the capabilities of Schnorr signatures, where you can add up signatures and essentially summarize many signatures as one signature. Now, in a transaction, if you have, let's say, 4 different inputs, because you're spending 4 different smaller coins to make up the amount you need, those 4 inputs are going to have 4 signatures. Those 4 signatures are going to take up the majority of the space in a transaction. Signatures take up the most space in a transaction. The inputs and the signatures take up the most space. So cross-input signature aggregation is where you summarize the 4 signatures into one, and you have one signature that applies to all 4 inputs. Theoretically, with Schnorr signatures, we could, in the future, perhaps even do cross-transaction signature aggregation, so you had one signature for the entire block. But for now, the obvious and immediate target is cross-input signature aggregation. And as far as I can tell, I was having a conversation with Nick Jonas about this, and I can never remember if it's Jonas Nick or Nick Jonas. I don't know which one's the first name. I apologize, Nick. I apologize, Jonas. Either way. Anyway, I was having a conversation with one of the 2 main authors of Taproot about this, and it was a very interesting conversation, because I think cross-input signature aggregation could even allow miners to summarize the signatures after the transaction has been broadcast and take up significantly less space in the blockchain, in the block, which means more transactions per block, which means effectively more transactions per second on the base chain. So that's one change. The other one, we just mentioned Eltoo. Well, Eltoo needs the sig hash any prev out or sig hash no input. That would be a soft fork. That's another possibility. The third one is a system called covenants, which is basically the idea that you have in the transaction, you can put in a transaction conditions that control not only how that transaction will be spent, but how the next transaction will be spent. So effectively a policy engine. You can control the transaction in which you are spending something. And say, for example, here's a chunk of Bitcoin I'm sending to this address. From here, it can only go to this specific address. So that's whitelisting or vaulting if you want. So you can do that with covenants. You can say it can only be spent in a transaction that also pays someone else this amount. So you could do a commission or something like that. So you can do various interesting smart contracty things that place restrictions on how something can be spent that you can put inside the transaction script. There's a couple of different ways this can be done. One is opcat, which is a script operator. That might be one of the future upgrades. The other one is check template verify, which is basically making a template of the subsequent transaction. A couple of different proposals there. That might be something, although it's not as developed as the 2 other things I just talked about. Let's see, what else? I think that's it so far in terms of really interesting proposals for upgrades to the base protocol of Bitcoin. All right, let's see what else we have. Ooh, 200 people on the live stream. Okay, you're a bit late, but I'm glad you're here. So please stick around. We are about halfway through now, and we'll continue answering questions. This one's an interesting one. Sid asks, one can use a single list of 24 words for all cold wallets for Bitcoin, Ether, ADA Cardano, and a second list of 24 words for all hot wallets. If a person is properly organized and secure, will they ever need more than these two different lists of 24 words? This is a great question, Sid. So yes, this is one way of doing these things, and in fact, you can organize your life effectively around two mnemonics. The nice thing about mnemonic-based hierarchical deterministic wallets, HD wallets as they're known, is that a single mnemonic, which is a list of 12 to 24 words, can support multiple currencies, multiple sub-accounts per currency, and you can have a near unlimited number of sub-accounts, sub-currencies, and addresses hanging off the tree that you generate from this simple 12 to 24 word mnemonic phrase. Now, interestingly enough, the industry has now moved more closely to 12 word mnemonics, simply because it is considered a waste to use 24. They don't really give you additional security, and operationally they're a bit difficult. So if I was to rephrase what you wrote in your question, I would say all of the above, but with mnemonics of 12 words to make them easier to back up. And you could certainly use one 12-word mnemonic for all of your cold storage of all of your different currencies, and one for your hot storage. What you're describing here is what we call a tiered storage strategy. It's one of the things I talk about in my recent workshop, which is the Path to Self-Custody or Security workshop, and I talk about these strategies for risk management. I actually suggest that you might have 2 or 3 tiers, depending effectively on how cold or how hot you want these wallets. So you can have like a deep freeze cold storage. You can have a medium cold storage, which is more like an operational wallet. Think of that like your checking account, savings account that you have on a hardware wallet that you use for operational purposes. Maybe you use it to run a company. That's something I do. I have a mnemonic phrase on a hardware wallet that I use for payroll and company expenses and for income from my shop, for example. That's not deep cold storage, but at the same time, it's not a hot wallet. So it's somewhere in between, a middle tier. And then I also have a mnemonic that I call my petty cash, which I never have more than a couple $100 worth of crypto in, which is for all of my petty activities. That's more like the wallet I have in my back pocket. That's the one I will use. I'll use that single mnemonic for all of my mobile wallets on my smartphone. At any point in time, I might have 12, 13, 14 different wallets that I'm testing and trying out. I initialize all of those off a single mnemonic because I don't want to be backing up 15 different phrases. Just one phrase, and I recover that one phrase into all of these wallets and use them simultaneously. Some of them use different paths, so they won't see the same balance. Some of them use the same path. It doesn't really matter, just for petty cash. I use it for testing purposes. I use it to run my my mobile Lightning wallet, so I can, make Lightning payments off my smartphone. So that's the petty cash hot wallet. It literally is like the wallet I have in my back pocket. The mid-tier, as I said, is more like a checking account, operational account. I have a bit more money in there. It's on a hardware wallet, but not cold. And then if I wanted to put money away for my retirement or something like that, well, in that case, that's my cold wallet, a completely different third mnemonic that I don't touch. In fact, it's not on a hardware wallet. It's vaulted. I don't even have access to it. It would take weeks and air travel to get to my cold wallet, and that's on purpose. I can't reach it. So that tiered strategy that you described is a very common risk management process, especially for individuals or individuals who also run some company or freelance professional activities. And as I said, I do describe this tiered storage strategy as part of the path to self-custody and climbing the financial sovereignty staircase, if you like, in my workshop, Path to Self-Custody, which you can find on my shop on aantonov.com. You might find that interesting. By the way, here's that Path to Self-Custody Security Workshop bundle. But it's not the new workshop, because actually the new workshop that is even more popular than the self-custody workshop is the new inheritance planning workshop, which I am really, really excited about. The inheritance planning workshop was developed by Pamela Morgan, who is an attorney who's written the Crypto Asset Inheritance Planning book and is, the world expert on inheritance planning for cryptocurrency and crypto assets. And we had a collaboration where the workshop is being sold on antonov.com, and you can take that workshop. It's a video workshop with exercises and all kinds of useful resources. It was beta tested by the patrons. They really, really enjoyed it. Several community builders took that workshop at a discount, of course, one of the perks, and really enjoyed it and learned a lot. And most importantly, they put a plan in place, and that's so important. Inheritance planning is not about studying, it's about doing, which is why the first part of that inheritance planning workshop is called Get It Done. So you can find that. Let's see what else we have. Questions. Why is everyone so obsessed with the price of Bitcoin? How can I convince my friends who see it as an investment that it's so much more than that? Well, there's really two ways of looking at this, LCJ. One is, in many cases, because the fear of missing out and the excitement that's created around bubbles, people only really notice Bitcoin, and they only really talk about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, honestly, when the price is doing some kind of rally, and then the news is full of stories of people either getting rich or getting wrecked, and that attracts attention, and that attention leads more people to it. So for many people, the first experience they have is as an investment asset, is a price-based focus. Now, my goal and my role has always been to say, okay, no matter how you got into this, no matter what you came for, I have a story to tell you which is about why this matters a lot more than just as an investment, as a personal investment choice, why this is a very important tool for freedom and personal empowerment, for open and free societies, open and free borders, an open world where everyone can participate in financial activity, why it's such an important tool for freedom, and why it's so important not just for the developed world, but even more so the other 6 billion, the people who don't have access to these banking facilities and financial assets. So speaking of the other 6 billion, one other perspective you have to have is, for many people who live in desperate financial conditions, where they feel trapped, where they don't have too many options, where they don't have the option to invest in different assets, where they don't have access to international markets, where they don't have access to a way of saving for the future in a currency that's not going to just collapse under inflation, or where they don't have access to foreign currency and they can't move money in and out of their country. For many of these people, price matters because price represents their own financial freedom. And so that's another very interesting perspective. But, don't worry about whether your friends can be convinced or not. I would suggest you focus on your own learning, your own educational path, and they'll figure it out eventually. They will definitely figure it out eventually, or not, and that's okay too. Bitcoin isn't for everyone, and not everyone needs it. You often hear these talking heads on TV, especially the kind of rich investment bankers, people like Jamie Dimon and the heads of the big investment banks, and they said nobody needs Bitcoin. And what they're really saying is, I don't need Bitcoin. And of course they don't. They're at the top of the pyramid of the modern financial world, and from their perspective, everything looks rosy up there. They're not at the bottom. And so why would you want a system that removes the pyramid structure if you're at the top of the pyramid? You don't see any reason why that's necessary. Of course you don't. Yeah, focus on education, focus on learning. You follow the path that works for you. Get the enrichment that comes from knowledge and learning and doing something interesting, meeting new people, talking about things that are more important than money. The most important thing to remember is that there is no poorer person than a person who only has money. Oh, here's a nice question. Tommy Cooksey asks, or Cooksey. Tommy Cooksey? I'm butchering your names today. I'm so sorry. Listen, if you're on the chat and you can help me pronounce names better, just drop in your name and then I'll make sure next time to pronounce it better. All right, let's try this one again. Tommy Cooksey says, when is Mastering the Lightning Network going to be available? I'd like to use your books to teach others. How do you feel about that? I don't want to offend or use anything out of your Creative Commons license. Well, thank you so much, Tommy. I can't tell you how happy it makes me to hear that you want to use some of my work to teach someone. I mean, that's the whole point of writing it. And first of all, it's available now. It's the first draft manuscript that has been delivered to the publisher. We just received the technical review. It's going to need some changes, some fixes. It's going to need some polishing. It's going to need some language changes. I'm going to be adding a bit. But essentially, it's 95% there. It's not polished, but it's there. And you can read it online. You can read it on github.com/lnbook/lnbook. The repository in which the project was born and grew. The book is written online in an open format where you can literally watch me make commits on a daily basis, and my co-authors, Olala Stocken and Renee Picard. We're going to be working on it furiously over the next couple of weeks to deliver the final edits, and it's going to be available December. So this has been a mad rush to make it through for Christmas sales. Publishing is one of those industries where 80% of your business happens in 1 month in the Christmas sales, whether we like it or not. So we're going to try and hit that target and have it available in December, but it is available now. And under the current Creative Commons license, it is a Creative Commons attribution, non-commercial, non-derivative, which means that you can use the book to teach, you can share it with friends, you can read it for free, all of that online. When it comes out in print, the exact same book as it is in print will be available online. You can read it for free. And you can teach it to someone else based on that same material, completely open. All you have to do is say, hey, this book is available here, and provide a link. That's the attribution. And that's all. Beyond that, within a year, we hope to open the license to a fully open Creative Commons attribution share-alike, which means at that point we can do derivatives, which means translations, most importantly, translations into other languages, as well as use it for mashups to make university courses, presentations, and even commercial republication. At that point, you can pretty much do whatever you want as long as you also share and you provide attribution. So it's coming out in December. You can use it right now. And thank you so much for deciding to use my work to teach. That's beautiful. My screensaver decided to pick this precise moment to shut down on me. So, woo! Yes, the Crypto says the mashup he looks forward to is a dubstep version of mastering Bitcoin. Something like that. Yeah, it will happen. Probably. I'm not going to make it, clearly. I mean, you heard that first sample. It was terrible. So maybe somebody else can make the dubstep version of that. Giovanni asks, operators on the Lightning Network are manipulating their channel fees to encourage flow in a direction or another to avoid rebalancing. High fees to encourage inbound, low fees to encourage outbound. Could someone infer payment flows from this behavior? Giovanni, I honestly will be forced to question the assumption. I'm not sure that most operators in the Lightning Network are manipulating their channel fees. Honestly, I just set them and forget them. And if I need to rebalance, usually I can do it with some kind of circular rebalancing, a loop in, loop out, or splicing operation of that kind. So, or worst case, close and open a channel. But, you know, nowadays, especially with fees low and the mempool empty, there's so many other options. I have not really seen channel fees to use that. But of course, if you keep changing channel fees, because that gets announced to the network, yeah, that could kind of infer payment flows, but really not that much. I don't think you'd really be able to infer much about that, other than some nodes have more inbound versus outbound activity, which is kind of obvious. You know, I run my shop on the Lightning Network, and that uses a node that has predominantly inbound activity, and it also has predominantly inbound capacity. Giovanni has a follow-up in the chat, says there's a tool called Charge LND that does this automatically. I have not used that, and I did not know about that or have seen it in use. So thank you for letting me know about that. See, things move so fast, and I learn something new every day. By the way, recently I managed to denial of service myself by making two mistakes in my fee settings. The first one was that I set a 0 base fee. The first one, okay, so let me start that story again. So I recently did a denial of service attack on myself, and this was because I accidentally set the fees wrong on my main most connected Lightning node, which is 0.ln.antonov.com, and that node has 190 channels or so, and I wanted to set the base fee to 0 to enable some routing algorithms that really give great results when the base fee is 0, specifically a routing algorithm called Picard Payments, invented by Rene Picard, that is being researched right now. And so I set the base fee to 0. But then I accidentally also set the prorated or proportional fee to 0 also. Now, guess what happens when you have a very well-connected node with 180 channels or so, 190 channels, and you charge 0 fee for routing, just 0 altogether? Well, the entire Lightning Network tried to route over my node, and my node ran out of HDLC space on the channels and then promptly crashed. So then I had to bring it back up and figure out why it crashed. And then I tried to use the command line to change the routing fee. So then I discovered an interesting discrepancy, because in the configuration file where you set the routing fee for channels that have yet to be opened, the routing fee is described as satoshis per million for the proportional routing. But in the command line, it uses a percentage. So I wanted to set it to, let's see, I wanted to set it to 500 satoshis per million, which is 0.05%. And instead I set it to 500%, 500%. And then nobody wanted to route through me. Because the fee was 500%. So then I got no routing through my node, and then I had to fix it again. Fortunately, someone contacted me, and it was quite funny. Someone sent me a message on Telegram, and they said, do you know that you have 500% fees set on your node? I'm like, no, I didn't know that, but thank you so much. I will now fix that. So yes, I went from being a black hole that sucked all of the HTLCs on the network into it to being a supernova that repelled all HTLCs and sent them away. The Swiss Road to Crypto asks, what are the security and privacy compromises someone makes if they are, or if they use, a Lightning service provider? Is it comparable to a custodial wallet? Isn't using a Lightning service provider the easiest way to have many channels open with just one connection? This is a great question. I was having a conversation just last week, in fact, when I was visiting Berlin. I got to meet briefly with Thomas Voigtlin, the developer of Electrum. We were talking about the Lightning implementation in the Electrum wallet, which I wasn't very familiar with and I was trying to learn more about. So interestingly enough, we talked about this concept of what does it mean to be a custodial or non-custodial wallet on the Lightning Network? How can you say, is this wallet custodial or is this wallet non-custodial? And I kind of learned something new again, which was that really we can't simply make that a Boolean statement. It's not a binary. The custodial, non-custodial is a non-binary. It's a spectrum. So you can be custodial-ish, you can be custodial curious, you can be completely heterocustody or bicustodial. You can have all kinds of custodial arrangements. And with the Lightning Network, that means a lot of different things. For example, your keys, your coins. Great. Okay, so you can have the keys that control your endpoint on the channel. But if you only have one channel, and that channel goes to a service provider, then they will see all outgoing HTLCs that come from your node. And so that's a privacy problem. And it's also a denial of service problem because they can stop you from making payments. You can be required to, you can be essentially censored. At the same time, you've got to consider other aspects of the network, like, for example, the gossip protocol. So the gossip protocol is how nodes learn about the topology of the network. They learn about which nodes are connected to which other nodes, what payment channels exist, and how much those payment channels charge to route in each direction. So fees, timeouts, and channels are announced via the gossip network. And that information is used by your node in order to do pathfinding. So if you want to send something from one end of the Lightning Network to another node on the Lightning Network, your node, your wallet, if it's a fully formed wallet that is a full Lightning node on the network, will basically have a map of the entire Lightning Network, all 16,000 or so nodes, all 60,000 or so, 60,000 channels that exist that are publicly announced. There's also private channels we don't know about, and nodes that are not publicly announced. But in any case, it will use that map to say, okay, how do I get from A to B? I could go this way, I could go that way, this one's more expensive, this one's better connected, etc., etc. Pick a path, and then construct an onion routed path that reaches and gets routed from that node to the other node. So your node does the pathfinding, it does the routing. But you could have a relationship where your wallet is kind of a lightweight node and it doesn't do its own pathfinding. Instead, it just forwards something to a service provider, and the service provider then decides how to route it on the network. So the service provider is doing the routing. And so that's not custodial. You still have the keys, but the route is picked by someone else, which means that, again, there's a privacy risk and a censorship risk. Then the third aspect of running a Lightning wallet or a Lightning client is whether you're monitoring the Bitcoin blockchain. So if you're making transactions and monitoring the Bitcoin blockchain, you're looking for channels being opened, you're looking for channels being closed, you're looking for transactions that might be happening. You're also looking for that dreaded cheat transaction that your channel partner might make, so you can then send your penalty transaction to penalize them. That's part of the protocol. So are you watching the blockchain? And if you are watching the blockchain, are you watching it with your own Bitcoin node, or are you using a lightweight protocol, kind of like a simple payment verification or a neutrino style lightweight protocol? So there's all of these. It's a multi-dimensional thing. It's the keys, it's the gossip, it's the pathfinding, it's the blockchain access and monitoring. And then, of course, there's the incoming liquidity. Like, do you have lots of independent sources of incoming liquidity on the network with channels from many nodes? Or do you use a mechanism like trampoline routing, where effectively incoming payments are routed to a service provider who then hands them off to you by opening a payment to you? That's custodial-ish, because for a moment they have your payment, maybe for 30 minutes. And they have your payment to the point where they can keep it. So you have to trust them a bit. So effectively, the Lightning Network gives us a lot of choices. You can do the whole hog, full node, full Bitcoin node, do everything client. If you're running LND or C Lightning or Eclair, that's what you're doing. You can have a mobile wallet that does some of this, but not all, but still has control of the keys, with multiple channels, maybe no blockchain monitoring. Maybe it doesn't use your own node, but somebody else's node for the blockchain. Maybe you have a lightweight wallet, and maybe you have a full custodial wallet where effectively you just have a front end. Maybe you have a watchtower service. There's all of these dimensions. So this is a multi-dimensional issue, and it's a spectrum of custody. And it's a really interesting topic, which I think I'm going to be talking about more in the future. And we're going to need to figure out exactly where we jump on this. But again, as I talk about in my Path to Self-Custody workshop, these are not questions where you are either doing it the right way or you shouldn't do it at all. This is a journey. You start with the degree of self-custody that you can handle based on your technical competence right now. And if that means jumping on the Lightning Network with a custodial wallet, or jumping on the Lightning Network with a lightweight wallet that makes it really easy for you, great. Hey, you're on the Lightning Network. You're already part of a tiny minority of people who are taking advantage of this new technology. You've taken the first step up the staircase to financial sovereignty. Eventually, you might decide to, hey, I'm going to run a node. So you get a Raspberry Pi or a mini computer, set it up at your home, you run a node. Now your wallet is connecting to that node for its blockchain information. And you've gone one step further on the financial sovereignty staircase. Maybe eventually you run a Lightning node on that little mini computer as well as a Bitcoin node, and your wallet is just connected to that. Well, now you're really moving up the self-custody staircase. So that's the idea. it's a journey, it's a spectrum. And by the way, just a quick attribution, the concept of the sovereignty staircase, or the staircase to financial sovereignty and self-custody, is a concept that was invented by Dr. Stephanie Murphy, my co-host on the Let's Talk Bitcoin, or as it's now called, Speaking of Bitcoin podcast, which you can listen to. It's the longest running English podcast, and Dr. Stephanie Murphy came up with this fantastic idea, and I've been running with it since. All right, now, as you probably know, there is a team behind this smiling face. In fact, if there wasn't a team, it wouldn't be a smiling face, trust me. A whole team of people who helped me do this work, who helped me achieve this mission, who are supported by you. And we've done some introductions of that team on the Patreon page. If you are a Patreon supporter, community builder, you've seen some of the team members. So I just wanted to point out that this month is Jessica's birthday. And Jessica is one of the amazing team members who make this possible. You've met Jessica often as a Antonaut moderator here in the chat. So please join me in a quick emoji storm. Birthday themed emoji storm, so we can wish Jessica happy birthday. We'd be absolutely lost without her, so let's show her some appreciation. Anonymous asks, you've written Mastering Bitcoin, Mastering Ethereum, and Mastering the Lightning Network. What's next? Quite honestly, nothing. I'm tired, and more importantly, these books never end. Mastering Bitcoin is in its second edition, and I am now working on a proposal to my publisher to do a third edition of Mastering Bitcoin. I had promised that once Taproot was locked in for activation, I would add a section on Taproot, TapScript, and Schnorr, together with some other updates, fixes, and improvements in the book, and that would be the right time to do the third edition of Mastering Bitcoin. And that's probably going to take a few months. Maybe it will be out for December. I hope so. Third edition of Mastering Bitcoin is the next project I'm doing, and you guessed it. Well, at some point, Ethereum's probably going to launch Ethereum 2.0 with the beacon chain and the sharding and the optimistic rollups and the other technologies for scaling. And at that point, it will be a great idea to do a refresh, an update of Mastering Ethereum. So that will be the second edition of Mastering Ethereum. By the time I finish that, I'm guessing it will be time to do the second edition of Mastering the Lightning Network, because that will be a bit dated. Do you see where this is going? Do you see where this is going? Because as soon as I'm finished with Mastering the Lightning Network second edition, I'm going to have to go back and do Mastering Bitcoin fourth edition, then Mastering Ethereum third edition, then Mastering the Lightning Network third edition, then Mastering Bitcoin fifth edition. And at some point, I'm going to be this shriveled up, pruny little man, hopefully sitting on a beach somewhere, writing Mastering Bitcoin 72nd Gold Edition. And telling my grandchildren about the time when I wrote the first edition, when I didn't have incontinence and I could still walk without an exoskeleton, and we didn't live on Mars. So yeah, that's what's next. I give you the full picture. All right, let's see. We'll maybe do one or two more questions. Anonymous asks, what's your opinion on COMIT Network's Bitcoin to Monero atomic swap? Is that a game changer or too little, too late? So this is a relatively uninformed opinion. I have not used the Bitcoin to Monero atomic swap capability, and I haven't really read much about it. But obviously, you know, an atomic swap is an atomic swap, and I understand what that does. And I have used, and I'm interested in, of course, Monero. Monero is a system that offers very strong anonymity. It's probably the strongest privacy coin that exists at the moment. It has a number of interesting technologies embedded in it, and for that reason, I'm very interested in Monero. I'm even more interested in the ability to use Monero and Bitcoin together, and atomic swaps make that a very strong possibility. So until now, you could exchange Bitcoin with Monero on a variety of decentralized exchanges, including, of course, BISQ, BISQ, which is a peer-to-peer decentralized exchange, and that's a great capability. But even though it's decentralized and peer-to-peer, there is still the coordination through BISQ. Even though it's peer-to-peer, it's not perfectly decentralized. Maybe atomic swaps make it a bit more decentralized. And so, yes, I'm very interested in that. It offers a path for protecting privacy, for increasing the privacy of Bitcoin, and of course, you know, it offers a path for people who have liquidity or the ability to get liquidity through Bitcoin, which obviously has the biggest liquidity in the space, and then convert that into the stronger privacy of Monero, which is obviously very important in some places, in some contexts. Like if you are fighting a vicious dictatorship in Belarus or in North Korea or in Venezuela or whatever, if you're a political activist, if you're trying to, I don't know, help women get out of Texas or some other brutal place like that, then you may need a strong privacy coin because you're fighting against big powers. So in that case, Bitcoin isn't private enough, but Bitcoin is liquid enough. And so an atomic swap between Bitcoin and Monero sounds like a match made in heaven. And I'm very, very excited about that. Oh, and so as a follow-up, what is an atomic swap? An atomic swap is basically it's effectively a smart contract between two blockchains where you say, I commit some money here that can be redeemed by you only if and only if you commit some money on that chain, which can be redeemed by me. So I put Bitcoin down on the Bitcoin blockchain that's locked. The condition to unlock it is that I get Monero on the Monero chain. And you lock Monero, and the condition to unlock that is that you get the Bitcoin on the Bitcoin chain. And by both of us doing that simultaneously, we can't steal each other's crypto. Either both transactions go through, or neither transaction goes through. And through that mechanism, you can basically exchange one cryptocurrency for another cryptocurrency in a trustless fashion. Now, of course, if a atomic swap isn't working for whatever reason, if one of the two people disappears or goes offline, then after a timeout, you can get a refund on your commitment. So if I put Bitcoin into the Bitcoin blockchain, lock it up in hope of exchanging it for Monero, and then you disappear and I don't get my Monero, after a while I get a refund because a timeout or time lock expires. But if all goes well, I get my Monero, you get your Bitcoin, and we don't have to trust each other. So this is essentially a smart contract mechanism. It very much works the same way that a payment channel works in terms of using, in many cases, a hash time-locked contract to do the atomic swap. And it's almost like a payment channel between blockchains. Oh, here comes Johnny Boy to tell us that Bitcoin Cash is better. No, it isn't. Moving on. Anonymous asks, what are Bitcoin covenants? How could they be used? Bitcoin covenants are a structure that allows you to lock an output, lock an amount of money, and lock it in such a way that when it is spent, there are conditions on the transaction that spends it. So obviously when you lock money into an output, when you create a Bitcoin output and you lock money in an address, one of the conditions is you have to present a signature corresponding to that address. That's the obvious condition. But what you can do is put conditions on the other part of the transaction. So let's say, for example, I lock into a Bitcoin address and I put a condition. Not only do you have to sign with a key for that Bitcoin address, but you can only send it to this other specific Bitcoin address. So if I did that, that would create essentially a vault whereby even if you steal my private key, the only transaction you can sign from that address with that private key is a transaction that pays an address of my choice, so you can't send it away from me. And that means it's unstealable, effectively. That type of covenant is called a vault, a covenant vault. And it's a mechanism that could really significantly increase the security. For example, if you put money into cold storage locked by a covenant, not only does a thief have to have the private keys, but if the covenant then specifies that they can only send it back to another cold storage address you have, which is your backup Hail Mary address, then effectively it becomes impossible to steal. And you can make another form of covenant, which is what's called a recursive covenant, where you could essentially say you can only spend this in a transaction that also has a covenant. So you can only send it to a whitelist address that also has a whitelist address that also has a whitelist address, etc., or that has a time lock, or that has some other condition. So you can essentially propagate conditions into the future by applying them on transactions that haven't happened yet, by essentially putting these covenants into the outputs that you create in a transaction and saying this is how it can be spent. We don't even know what you could do, although there is some controversy around that. The controversy is that if you have the ability to do recursive covenants, and it's not exactly clear how you can stop that from happening, if you can do recursive covenants, you can effectively create whitelists and blacklists that can be unbreakable, which means that you could say this can only be sent to these specific addresses, or it cannot be sent to these specific addresses. Now, the counter argument to that is that we already have whitelists, blacklists implemented by exchanges. So the fact that they could do this with covenants on the blockchain isn't very different than the fact that they could do that through policy on their custodially controlled funds. But that's the ongoing debate about covenants. The question is, can you make covenants that are not recursive, where you can't essentially apply a covenant on a covenant on a covenant and extend it indefinitely into the future? And if you can't, do we still want covenants? Because they create this possibility of whitelists, blacklists, and essentially islands of Bitcoin that are isolated from the rest of the network. This is an ongoing conversation. In fact, it's a very interesting conversation that's taking place on the Bitcoin developers mailing list. And you can read about that if you want by looking at the archives. It was a conversation that was happening a couple of weeks ago. I find covenants fascinating, and there's a lot of valid points on both sides of this argument. I'm not convinced by either side yet, and I don't think covenants are likely to happen anytime soon, but they are one of the proposed upgrades for the Bitcoin scripting language. That was a great question. I really geeked out on that one. I really love these somewhat more technical questions, but technical questions that also have some depth to them, some nuance, that have some political implications or social implications or philosophical implications as to how these things could evolve in the future. I really enjoy exploring those with you. Thank you for asking questions that allow me to geek out, but also thank you for asking great questions that have allowed me to learn new things every time I do this. It's been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you on this beautiful August Sunday, and I'm going to pretend it's still August because we rescheduled this. 235 people watched this, or listened to it at least, and I really appreciate you coming along and spending time with me. We have another live stream at the end of September, and in the meantime, if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the like button on this live stream so other people can see it, or even share it directly. All right. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
Hi, I'm Andreas Antonopoulos. If you enjoyed that video, consider that it takes a lot of work to produce open and free content that can be shared with everyone around the world. This isn't sponsored by some company. It's not promoting a product or an altcoin or some kind of investment scheme. My goal is simply to help explain the technology of Bitcoin and open blockchains to as many people as possible in a neutral way that focuses really on the incredible possibilities that this technology brings us. If you'd like to support that mission, subscribe to my channel and go on patreon.com/aantonop, where you can participate and help me build better content for more people. Thank you.